Hello and welcome to CherrySTEM number 25, the ABCs of approach, bravery, and confidence. Now, before we start our podcast, I'd like to take your attention for a minute and point it at the screen and at the Patreon link that is on there, and specifically at the Challenger mode tier. It is a mode, a reward level, if you will, that allows you to hang out with us after this podcast in a hangout chat. It's a video chat where we can talk about what we talked about on the podcast and generally just shoot the shit, and you guys can ask us questions, and we have some follow-up articles and things like that we're going to look at. So if you'd like to support the stream, if you'd like to support this podcast and see more of it in the future, please check out patreon.com/AnnaCherry and pledge to the Challenger mode tier. Now, we're going to talk about some stuff today, and it's going to be awesome. So this actually comes, the idea for this actually comes from one of our patrons. They're at patreon.com/AnnaCherry, and it has to do with, the question anyway, had to do with approach anxiety and how to deal with that sort of thing. So we decided to create an entire podcast episode around this topic. And we're going to tell you how to deal not only with approach anxiety, but also how to cultivate bravery, which will ultimately lead to confidence. And that's all that, all of us want that here, right? Yes? Maybe? I don't know. I'm not feeling confident about my answer. So, all right, before we begin getting into the meat of it, is there anything in particular you'd like to say? My lovely co-host, Richard Rall.
Thank you. No, I think just the whole. I think we'll get into a lot of it, and I know you've done more preparation on this. I've done talks on this in the past, and so I know you have some specific stuff that you want to bring in, and so I'm looking forward to some new stuff added to it. So.
And I'm looking forward to your wealth of knowledge, because a lot of this information came to me from you. So.
Yeah.
So if anyone's
I have a lot
qualified,
of experience in it. Yeah.
If anyone's qualified, it is you. Well, even the specific research that I will get into about dynorphins, capopioids, and stuff like that is heat shock,
right.
Yeah, all of that good stuff. All of that sort of came to me.
I forgot we were going to get into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do the planning for these, and then I just rope them into talking with me about it. So, all right. So what I want to start off with is make sure that I have chat. Okay, good. Yes, I do. All right, how about that, guys? That should have really improved the sound or the volume. So RIP your ears. That may be too much. So turn down your headphones if you need to. So let's talk about happiness, because really that's what it's all about. Why do we want to cultivate any of these things? Why do we care about dealing with approach anxiety and being brave and having confidence? What is that all for? Well, it's for accomplishing your goals. It's for going after things that you want. It's for changing your life. It is to be happy. But I have a wonderful quote here that is, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. And you've probably heard you may have heard a line similar to that, a lyrical, poetic sort of adage that happiness is like a bird. The more you chase it, the more it flies away, and then when you're not paying attention to it, it lands on your shoulder. Well, I guess then happiness is a cat. Catchiness. Cappiness. All right, speaking of cappiness, we're going to get into some capopioids, and it's my favorite topic, but I will ease you guys into this one. So we'll start off slow. So
basically, you're saying happiness is an asshole.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm trying to say that there's no magic pill or secret lock that you can open and suddenly everything's happy. No, happiness is a way of living. It is a way of looking at the world. It is a daily process, is what I take from that. And of course, dopamine, which is one of the key molecules of happiness, it activates neurological networks of confidence, creativity, and problem solving. Even our ability to stave off illness is significantly increased when we're happy. Now, you or someone you know maybe is probably on anti-anxiety meds currently. The World Health Organization predicts depression to be the largest global health burden by 2030. And another element that helps us, that sort of ties into all of this, is that I want to introduce to you guys, or to elevate if you already are familiar with it, the concept of neuroplasticity, which is the constant wiring and rewiring of neurons. And neuroplasticity helps us train our brain. So that's what I mean by happiness is a way. It's a process. It is a daily training of thoughts, and thoughts lead to behaviors. And how that all occurs is through neuroplasticity. And there's some really cool
That's
links.
how change occurs. That's how you get to where you have to be. If you're not currently happy, then obviously you have to be willing to change, because happiness comes from your brain. In other words, there's, you may think of happiness as coming from the outside, but the truth of the matter is the chemicals that are being released and the experience is actually created inside your head. And understanding that happiness comes from the inside, and that you have some power over what is released in your brain is a very powerful tool for understanding and kind of taking responsibility for your experience. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at there.
My favorite quote, actually, in fact, this may be my life quote, other than be the change you want to see in the world, or be the porn you want to see in the world, is life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. But if you don't have the proper tools or mentalizations, or literally physically changed neurons or responses of proteins in your brain, then you will not necessarily react in the best way. So what this podcast episode is going to be all about is to help you find ways to retrain your brain and gain the benefits that come from these particular things that I will be mentioning, as well as the scientific evidence behind them. As to, a lot of them are going to sound hippie wooey as all get out, but I have science to back it up. And patreon.com/AnnaCherry is a great resource for this podcast. I know you see a website link on the screen right now, but if you go there, it's sadly quite empty. Besides the Patreon links, simply because I've been too swamped to get to that website yet. But I have been uploading all of these to Patreon, and they are public. Each episode podcast is an audio file. There is an RSS link on the front page of Patreon that you can plug into a podcast player of your choice, and that will give you all of the episodes, as well as keep you informed when new ones come out. And so all of the research and science and the information that we will be giving you will be in the Patreon post for this podcast episode, and it should come out before the end of the month on Patreon. So go ahead, check out patreon.com/AnnaCherry. Favorite it, bookmark it. If you can't pledge, just go ahead, favorite it and bookmark it, and then keep an eye on the public posts. Follow it if you can, and once the post will come out, you will have access to all of these details that we'll be talking about, all the research.
So obviously, right off the bat, when we're kind of starting with a presumed axiom that everyone should pick up at some point, but it's really one of those ones that for some reason is kind of counterintuitive until you've been around a while, I suppose. I think a lot of kids and things like that don't understand that if you want to change your experience, you have to change yourself, and that's really a lot of all of us spend a lot of time raging at the world around us, trying to get it to fit into a box that will make us happy, and it really just doesn't even really work like that. There is some level of that, of course, but the point is that by changing, if you want to change your experience, you have to change yourself. And then what's cool is from there, when you change yourself, you do change the world around you, and I think that's kind of the direction that you're going here. I just kind of wanted to recap on that. Sorry, I ran out of runway there. I know you wanted me to continue forward.
I just have a great quote, and I would hate to have dead air while I find it, but it's, speaking of change, and I kind of briefly touched on this in the Honey Badger radio episode on Thursday, but it has to do with this concept that we're all one, we're all connected. Because I mean, think about it. You're not completely self-sufficient. You rely on 10,000 different people to do their job, millions of people actually, to do their job every day. And just when you step outside, there's millions of interactions that can affect your day, like the butterfly effect. Somebody scaring a butterfly flying off of a leaf will scare a snake, or have a snake or I don't know, frog jump at it.
The snake goes after it, and that scares some cattle, and they create a dust storm that rises up in the atmosphere, creates a storm that comes across the ocean, and you think that you made the choice to go to work, but somebody slams into you from the side because a butterfly flapped its wing in Japan. Yeah, so I mean there is a level of understanding how much the world is just kind of happening to us, and how there's only so much we can do, and there man plans, God laughs, sort of thing.
Yeah, and of course, speaking of God, there I have found the quote by Octavia Butler, which is, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change.
That's a neat quote. But anyway, it's so the point is that it's really embracing change. Whenever you look at why does an animal die in the first place? Why is it? We found that death is programmed into animals, and basically they have a self-destruct timer set to the period of time at which their specialization, the environment will have changed too much for how much they have specialized to their circumstances. So it's basically animals have kind of they've got this dead man switch to where once they've over specialized and stopped adapting, basically they die off so that the younger generation can be more adaptive. And it comes down to that because the reality is constantly changing, you have these systems that have developed to match that constant change, and so of course we want to instill that same kind of habit of change in ourselves and adaptiveness. I mean, you kind of have to go in cycles. You can't, be 100% just, flailing all over the place, and you also can't just railroad yourself into one, putting all your eggs in one basket when it comes to the way that you change your mentality. There has to be sort of a balance, and the best way to have a balance is not some crappy middle, but kind of shifting back and forth between, these values, that are somewhat in opposition of each other.
Yeah. So how do we begin? How do we begin? Because I mean that's really what spurred this
okay, so let's go back to go back to the front of it. The whole point is for approach anxiety and things like that, and everybody. This gets down to like, if you know anybody, somebody on anxiety meds. It's kind of funny how much it's ubiquitous now. I constantly, it's like, is everybody on anxiety meds? It's kind of amazing how many people are being medicated, and I mean I understand why. There's a lot of changes in our society and the way that things have happened with technology and social media and the way that we
media
media in general. The way that we interact now has just been changing faster and faster and faster, and we really our human genetics really aren't keeping up, and so we're trying to plaster over the gaping holes that we're leaving, but it's not really working all that great.
And of course we haven't adapted to being on a public stage at all times, is what social media does, while simultaneously being exposed to people's doctoring of their lives in order to be appealing, be more presentable, more marketable. The whole media, corporate marketing, all of that sort of ball has left a deep
a deep wound, because we're all becoming more and more separated instead of our communications allowing us to come together more and have closer relationships. We end up getting much. I think what it is that there's a lot of kind of, it's like the sugary sweets kind of communication. We can take no risk.
280 characters.
Right. We can take no risk and get this quick, reward that is not lasting, but is something that is just kind of.
Sometimes just scrolling through aimlessly, brain responds to novelty. Novelty itself gives you a dopamine.
I think it's not just that. I think it's also kind of a trick, as in like it's a faking of social interaction that without the social bond that gives you a feeling of confidence in the world whenever you can look at who am I connected with and how am in my life and things like that, that you get that, you're, if you think about the way that an evolutionary system would develop to make sure that we socialize and that we get the bonds that are necessary, there are these interactions with people that would occur, and that we would be driven by dopamine to go after those specific types of interactions. But then those interactions are supposed to then culminate in some relationships, and if you think in a small tribal area, that kind of thing, those interactions will lead to people, actually forming some bonds. But here, because we've all the social media, what we're doing is we're being driven to do the interaction that starts the bonding phase, and then there's never any follow-up because it's so risk-free, and so therefore we end up, I think that's how we end up so disconnected specifically. But
that's a really good point. But something you mentioned, as well as what I'm seeing from chat, is, speaking of social media, essentially, I would like to talk about a flip side, or to address some concerns, and to sort of talk about the fear of approaching women in particular. And I don't mean a fear that comes from inside of you because of low confidence, but I mean the fear that comes from the repercussions that men face by approaching women in the current climate, in the Me Too, era, and all of that. And I would like to point out to you that first of all, the amount of men who have been affected by, such as losing their house, their job, their life, all of that scary stuff, the number of men that have actually gone through that is like 10 out of millions. And that's part of the problem of focusing on, or being fed a diet of a particular mentality, having an echo chamber that amplifies the bad experiences that men have with women. Thing is, though, if you think about it, how many, even though the celebrities,
I'm not sure I understand.
I'm just trying to say that
the number of people who did what is 10? What?
Number of men who have lost their lives, their jobs, their livelihood, their sanity, their everything, because of approaching the wrong woman and then going to jail for it or whatever.
Oh, and just there's a lot.
No, I'm trying to say that
just the approach. Okay, you're saying that
yes,
that just an approach,
just coming up to someone and just saying hello will not send you to jail.
Yeah. Usually not.
Yes, celebrities. There's so many celebrities that have been lambasted in public for questionable sexual misconduct. Point is, they didn't go to jail. Nobody arrested them. It's just
you're more likely to die from falling out of your bed. So
exactly, you're way more likely to lose everything by becoming addicted to prescription medicine that your doctor gives you than by approaching a woman to say a simple hello. Okay, right. So there are definitely levels of behavior that is punished.
See, I wasn't sure what mindset you were dealing with there. You're talking about the people who are looking at their fear of approach, and then the excuses that go around that, which are specifically that you can get in so much trouble now, and in today's environment of everything is harassment, everything is rape, everything is men are evil. That sort of environment is what you're kind of that's the mindset that you're
and of course whenever we do see men lambasted and destroy their reputation, their careers, their schooling, just destroyed by interaction with women, it's always based on sexual activity. So literally approaching someone to say hello, or smiling at someone or whatever, some harpy may take a YouTube video about it and yell at you on the internet, but once again, if you cut off all internet and move to the Amazon, that's not going to matter. I know you're not going to do that. You do have to live in this world. You do have to, sort of, if you get doxxed or things like that, you will be affected by it. But I'm trying to say,
I think
at the core of it, you're not going to die from it.
Yeah, well, of course. And it is good to kind of go back over that and notice that to yourself. So so whenever those weird little excuses pop up, that you can address them. But I think it's there's something greater to it than that. I mean, everybody has some level of approach anxiety, and there is a specific thing with men that if you think about it, once again, go back to the whole small tribe of people. Pre-selection is found in all throughout animals. Like for instance, with mice. A pre-selected male, one that has been that is bred with other females and therefore has the smell of other females on him, will even if it has so there are some diseases that mice can detect through scent, and a female mouse will actually prefer the diseased pre-selected male over the non-diseased male that has not been pre-selected. So there is a part of why do animals do this pre-selection process? Because it's how you find consensus. I mean, think about how anybody finds any truth. A lot of times, it is really dependent upon the group looking at it. How many people have looked at this problem and found out whether or not it is really true? I mean, even the idea of science itself, we say it's just about empiricism. It's just about empiricism. Yet, how many of us have done all those experiments ourselves? How many of us have literally seen absolutely every one of those experiments personally in front of us? Not many of us, I can tell you that. And if you think that you have, you're lying to yourself. But the point is that you're basing it on the idea of consensus, that a lot of people have looked at it, and so therefore animals have developed this system as well, and that's where pre-selection comes from. Females are basically trying to use the group mechanic to determine the value of something, and so that's why you see.
How does that relate?
Why is that? Because once they do not select a certain male, then basically they're showing that male is not valuable. So whenever you screw up an approach, you've been rejected, they tell the group, or they see that,
your
or the
brain
group
tells
sees
you
it,
they're gonna,
and so therefore it is a fear of basically being shown to the group as not a valuable male, because then once the group, especially if you have a very small group, comes to the consensus that this is not a valuable male because this one's rejected, this one's rejected, this one is rejected, the consensus is now that this male should not be given breeding rights, and so that's kind of how animals do it. So there is sort of this basic fear for breeding that we actually have in us as well.
Yes, and I definitely like to get right back to that, but before we go into actual approach anxiety, actual bit of it, I would like to still go back to the concept of fear, because that's what is sort of driving a lot of these excuses or these things that are coming up. And yeah, okay, so what if you say hello to the wrong person and get banned from doing cosplay permanently? First of all, that's impossible to do. You can't be banned from doing cosplay permanently. You can be banned from a convention. Also, for saying hello, come on now. Recognize that these are excuses that your brain is feeding you because it is trying to justify the fear. On top of that, yeah, I have been banned from places from doing cosplay, and what do? Fucking soldier on anyway. With the help of my patrons, with the help of a community, and I'm trying to build myself, but otherwise, it's just the two of us. Thankfully, I have Richard Rall for support. But yeah, fear is powerful. Even I have approach anxiety as a woman. Women are theoretically able to do pretty much anything, but that does not stop fear. So a lot of these things, these reasons that are coming up in your mind why not to approach, they are fear-based validations of behavior that are not necessarily rooted in reality.
Right, and you have to start, if you're going to change yourself, one of the things you have to do is start finding your excuses, because that's how you keep from changing, is you tell yourself you couldn't do anything different, and if you can't do anything different, why would you ever change? So the biggest the biggest enemy of change is excuses, or you can call them reasons if you like. It doesn't really matter. Sure, it's a reason. Why does that matter? If there is a strategy that can help you in the future, it doesn't matter if your reason was valid. None of that matters. What matters is the future. What matters is the strategy that will accomplish your goal, which is, if your goal is to become happier and become more engaged in a community or whatever it is. More open, more confident. And basically, what goes back to being happier. Then that's what you need to look at and stop giving a shit about, I had good reason. Because you can sit there and keep looking at all of these ideas of, I don't want to risk this, don't want to risk that, but without risk there is no reward. I think one of the things that a lot of very intelligent people have risk aversion as part of the reason why they became intelligent. And now bear with me for a moment here, but basically one of the things that they found is sometimes children who've been either abused or gone through extreme stress as a child, what happens is the fear response actually increases the brain's adaptation in a certain way, where basically you try to learn more. There is an increase in, it's like if your environment is dangerous, then you really need to be looking out for danger and trying to find it and find ways around it. And so I think sometimes a lot of more intelligent people actually are more fearful than they necessarily should be.
And so it actually goes right back to what I wanted to talk about, the fear aspect of the
And there's stuff having to do with the amygdala and the way that everything from there's other neuroscience that I don't want to get into that links these things together. I'm just want to point out there are other pathways by which this idea of fear and intellect being somewhat linked together. I mean, if you want to call upon something that's more kind of pop psychology, you could look at the fact that the whole idea of nerds and how a lot of times they are, portrayed as meek in a certain way, and so
homebodies
homebodies and fearful, and so there is kind of this trade-off that you may gain some intellect by having bad experiences as a child, but then and that may make you a problem solver. It may make you somebody who is really good at coming up with systems and troubleshooting and trying, avoiding, planning and avoiding mistakes and things like that. But then what happens is that becomes an obsession that into perfectionism, and perfectionism is this idea that you can solve the problem 100%, and it's completely a faulty idea that kind of creeps in. It's like, think about the idea. It's like, oh, well, if you want to avoid attacks, well, you just need to build a nice, big, strong castle. But the thing about it is, no matter how strong a castle you build, there is an army that will be large enough to destroy that castle and kill you. And so therefore, the safety that you thought was the castle is actually the danger, and the danger of leaving the castle and going out somewhere and therefore having anonymity as a king or whatever is actually the safety. And you'll find there's lots of these places where our idea of what's the careful route, what's the safety, is actually the danger, and understanding that a lot of your holdbacks against things and not taking risks, that you are taking risks by not taking risks. Understanding that's where everything from investments and things like that, there's risk inherent, because that is how you find safety, is through risk, because the world is always changing, and so it's just kind of kind of trying to push that into your head and say, okay, all this risk aversion that I have is actually leading me into danger. That's kind of one of the first steps of recognizing some of the things that can go wrong, and looking for your excuses, and looking for where it is that you're constantly telling yourself that there's nothing about you that needs to change. I don't need to change anything. I don't need to change anything. Everyone's constantly telling themselves that.
Sorry.
There's nothing about you.
Just trying to make sure I keep up with super chats for those people who would like to have their comments read on stream.
Okay. So your biggest enemy, if you're attempting to change, is those things that feel really comfortable. You're just certain you don't need to do anything different. It wasn't your fault. It doesn't matter if it wasn't your fault. There is a way around. There is another strategy. There is something that, hindsight is 20/20. And this goes back to, I don't want to get into Gödel incompleteness theorem, and
let's not.
But the funny thing is, they're at the very, I do want to point out, is that at the very basis of game theory and things like that, some of these questions that are very broadly applicable have been shown to you can find where there is hard science to back them up. I guess that's the only way I can just vaguely talk about it instead of getting into something really technical, because that's one of the problems, is that sometimes we get into I get into too technical of digressions, and so that gets it's too technical. But the point is that there are understanding your own drives, and there are unsolvable problems. In other words, they can only be solved in the circumstance. Let me give you a good example that I really like. That's one of my favorites. Is in developmental biology. As DNA is not like a direct plan type of program. What instead happens is the DNA is altered by local circumstances, and that changes what a given cell will as it goes from being a pluripotent cell into a more specialized cell, the specialization is guided by very local circumstances. And so the DNA, it's not just the DNA doing the work, it is the circumstance also doing the work. Now, you could say, well, the DNA created the circumstance, but then you're kind of asking, did the water carve out a riverbed, or did the riverbed guide the water? And there's a feedback loop there that you have to look at. So anyway.
Yeah, so back to, I'm not really sure how to segue into the fear thing that we were talking about earlier, but as you know, we mentioned a variety of ways in which we have this sort of instinctual response to fear. And then we also went further than that and talked about how intelligence can arise from negative experiences and be linked with fearfulness, therefore. So not only on an instinctual level we have fear, but there's also on sort of the next level up, the intellectually, there may be fear. So, of course, we are wired to be wary of new experiences, which says organizational behavior researcher Keith Rall, who is a management professor at Babson College and the author of What to Do When You're New, How to Be Comfortable, Confident, and Successful in New Situations. I have not read the book, but the excerpts from it are pretty cool. So, quote, "From an evolutionary standpoint, trying new things for much of human history could have been dangerous. Your performance can have a big impact on your status. And of course, in turn, status affects our ability to get the resources we need and to get the mates we need." And back to what you were, describing with pre-selection and this idea of social approval leading to your literal survival. So, for our far back ancestors, not looking dumb was an issue of survival, very directly. So, all of this means that deep in our, quote, deep in our brains, there is a primeval fear of looking bad, a fear of not performing as well as others, Rall explains. Quote, "One of the challenges with new hobbies is the fact that you're meeting new people, new groups, new experiences, and that triggers a lot of that anxiety we have about being the newcomer." End quote. So, fear is natural. It's part of being human. It's part of being a primate. But enjoyment will come as fear fades. And so how do you do that? Well, I say, first of all, realize that no one is paying attention to you. And I don't mean that in a mean way, that you have no friends. But no, I'm talking about the spotlight effect, which is our tendency to believe that all eyes are on us, when in reality, everyone else is busy with their own spotlight effect. Everyone else is busy thinking that all eyes are on them. So nobody's really paying any attention to you in a way.
In general. I mean, on occasion they are, but for the most part, there's a general feeling of always being paid attention to that's not very real.
Exactly. And it's amplified by social media, but I've found it's sort of one of those tricks of imagining everyone's naked. For me, it's been helpful to deal with approach anxiety and just in general social stress, is to understand that everyone is perceiving everything through a little reflective glass box of self. So everyone's thinking about themselves and their experience and their reactions and their feelings, and they're not really thinking of you. They're not really looking at you. They're kind of preoccupied with themselves. That is just the climate we live in currently. As we mentioned in the beginning, there is this disconnectedness and self-focus that has been given fuel by social media.
I'd kind of like to go through. There's sort of a process that I've taught to a few people that they've found helpful, and that is like one of the first steps in a process is actually giving up in a certain way. Now, I don't mean like not moving forward type of giving up, but giving up the idea of that you're going to be able to make it work without things going wrong. And because that's basically where all the anxiety comes from, is you're really trying your best to control the circumstances. There's like this, it's like you're in a vehicle that the steering wheel's loose and the pedal is stuck, and you're just trying your very best to control it. And sometimes you just need to bail out of the vehicle. It's you
Metaphorically speaking.
yeah, yeah, and and that's kind of what is going on when you really get in this idea of trying to control the circumstance of your social interactions and trying to make it work just right and control how people see you and and that's what it's really about. Is that's why you're anxious. You're trying to make sure that it works out right. Now, a lot of this stuff is going to be easier said than done, but there's a
Gets easier with practice.
right. There's a way in which you can kind of come to not give a shit about what people think that isn't a malicious not giving a shit. Now that's the difference. Is there one of the first steps that a lot of people try to take, when they're dealing with social anxiety and things like that, is to kind of hate people. Because if you hate them, then you might not care as much about what they think, and sometimes that's like a necessary first step for kids, and especially some like teenagers and things like that. Maybe that's kind of necessary for them.
Maybe that's why teenagers are assholes.
Yeah, exactly. Because they've been thrown into a situation where social is everything, and it's very everybody knows that the hell of high school. I don't need to explain it. So there's this difficulty of trying to get where it's not that you don't care, it's just that you give up on the idea that people are going to really understand your situation well, that they're going to be capable of properly empathizing and understanding your situation and walking a mile in your shoes, and they just can't. And
right, that's what I mean by the self, the box
right.
of self. Yeah.
And so and neither can you. And that's the big thing, is if you can understand that you're gonna fuck up your ideas about, it was your whole idea of what a person is going through and how easy it is for them to do whatever. If you can realize that that's complete bullshit, then you can start to not care about other people's bullshit ideas as well in a certain way, and just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. You're gonna have wrong ideas about me, and it just doesn't matter. There's one of the things that is helpful. A lot of the anxiety comes from not being able to get out. We've got all these work from home opportunities. We've got all these things where we just never really connect with people, or we work in we stack in boxes in a warehouse. You very rarely are interacting with a lot of people. And one of the things that some people I know who once kind of tried to do various things to overcome approach anxiety was to embrace the giving up. Now, I think that's part of where the class clown thing comes from as well, where a high school kid just starts, a lot of times people thought it was just for attention, but I think in a certain way you'll find that it's a lot of self-deprecating humor and things like that. It's kind of like, yeah, so what? Give me your worst. I don't care. You think I'm worthless, ugly, stupid, fat, whatever. I don't give a shit. Why does it matter? I do too. And what does it fucking matter?
That is just for a moment, that is sort of, we are talking to men. This is, women, if women can gain help from this, and I'm sure some, women that are slightly more masculine, or those who are a little different and don't fit into the normal, because girls have the social stuff easier. They sort of can meld together and understand what people like and want and what they want them to say a little easier than guys do.
Their mental toolkit is aimed in that direction
right.
more than guys.
So this is mostly for men and alternative women. So talking to men, there definitely is a hostile environment of go off and die somewhere else. Yes.
You mean when men are talked to?
Yes.
What you're
saying. When men are being told to go off and die somewhere else, there's no place for you here, leave.
Yeah.
And there's also men who refuse to be dragged into the regressive direction that some of the left and the right is taken right now. And so, they feel their community's leaving, they feel nobody's there for them, they feel like nobody cares. And sort of what you were saying is this element of, yeah, you hate me, well, so what?
Right.
So, because how do you deal with this idea of feeling like everyone just wants you to leave and not be there?
And that's the point, is you have to get to the point where you realize that you're sort of the same way to a certain extent also. In other words, where you want the best of people and you don't want to deal with their bullshit. That's just the truth.
Yep.
Everybody has bullshit and you don't want to deal with it. And so they have the same about you, and you have bullshit that they don't want to deal with. But here's the thing, you want the best of other people, and now you got to realize they also want the best of you. In other words, they want your good times. They want that, just like everybody has that same sort of, and you know what? There's really not a whole lot wrong with that. Just because people are a bit selfish, you know what? Wanting food is selfish. We have needs.
Reproducing is selfish.
Right. There's a level of selfishness that isn't like a black hole. It's not a. There's a level of selfishness that is simply it's harmonious with the way that reality has
It's
to work.
survival, yeah.
It's just, and so yeah, people are gonna want to just only have the best of you to a certain extent, and it is selfish, and it is. And if the closer that partner is, the more they should be accepting of those things and your bullshit, and dealing with the ways in which you'll kind of bump into them and inconvenience them, and that's kind of, there's a shared inconvenience you're supposed to be working towards as in being different human beings. But if you can realize that that you can focus on what people like about you instead of focusing on what people dislike about you, and realize that everybody has that, and recognize everybody is going through that it's easy to notice what people dislike about you. It's right there in your face. It hurts you. You remember it. You can dwell on it, and you don't want to. You want that to be gone. And the truth of the matter is, it's not going to be gone, but you can make it less. You can take the sting out of it.
Take the impact out of it.
By not focusing on it, by instead focusing on the fact that there are things about you that people like, whether it be your humor, whether it be whatever it is. There are always, even just little things. And here's the thing. What's wrong with improving and increasing the things about you that other people like, when that will give you reward as well?
Very good point, because as we were talking about women having women in general having a greater toolkit when it comes to dealing with people, try being like that. As in, what do women do? They smile, they're usually nice, they approach you in a sweet way, they do the sort of sweet thing, a cooperative thing of talking to people, trying to be friendly, finding out their name, asking about their kids.
But here's the thing: a lot of people are immediately gonna be like, "Oh, I just want you just want me to be conformist and just have stupid, worthless small talk with people at all times, and just constantly do whatever anybody wants and agree with the crowd at all times." And that's not real. That's taking it too far. There is. You've got to find your level of how much you're going to give away of your uniqueness in return for the comfort that you will give other people, and how much that will give you in return. And you just have to understand that. Here's the thing: we always tend to look at things as though they only have one side. Like, for instance, the idea that why animals do the things they do is for maximizing their genes, for instance. And so, therefore, whenever a female mammal is breastfeeding its offspring, it is selfishly, because that's what it's doing, is it wants to improve its
longevity, survival.
It's exactly the survival of its genes and its family and things like that. And so you can stare at that and make everything seem cold and dead, or you can look at the fact that there is a level of self-sacrifice in every one of these altruistic behaviors that have been developed by nature, and that a mother breastfeeding her child is giving it something. There is all those things that you do for a child are self-sacrifice. It's both at the same time, and that's the thing that most people have a hard time seeing, is both this ugliness and this beauty in the exact same thing, and that there is no it's one or the other. It is both. And so you can decide to focus on the cold, shitty aspect of things, or you can decide to focus on the more pleasant aspect of things. And the same thing is true whenever we're talking about you just want me to conform. Yeah, well, you want the approval that they'll give you in return for that conformity as well. And so we all are wanting something. We're all wanting to, and so there's kind of a level of relaxation that you can get by understanding everybody's going through this maze of crazy shit with all these different considerations of how much of my personality am I supposed to give way and conform to everybody else's desires? How much
how
is
much
too
do I
much?
let my freak flag fly, and how much do I
And how
hold
much
back?
do I go freedom? You'll never take our and then how much is that going to basically, because I always want things to be exactly my way? Am I going to
Exactly.
constantly be taking away from other people who want the same kinds of things? It's like, hey, I always want to be the center of conversation, and so I'm going to just I want the freedom to dominate every conversation, and and that freedom that you have right then is taking away other people's freedom, and because all of them want that same thing of being recognized and being able to talk and say what they want to say. And so there's kind of this lack of recognition that we all tend to have, because I don't know, it just the emotional hardware just didn't develop the level of complexity that we need now in these larger civilizations. We haven't got there yet, so we have to kind of fill in the gap with these philosophies and things like that are basically sets of tools. They're like sets of programs that help us navigate this complex shit that we have to navigate. So the point is, going back to the idea of letting go of caring about what other people think, and just being okay with it, like basically forgiving them. In other words, if you can get to this, instead of saying, hey, fuck you, fuck all of you, I don't give a shit what you think, instead say, I forgive you, we're all a bunch of kind of half idiots running into each other, and that's okay. And you're going to step on my toes, and you know what, I'm going to step on your toes too.
Yeah, the world's just a giant mosh pit.
Yeah.
Emotional mosh pit.
And so that's kind of a first step, is getting to that. And one of the ways you can do that is by getting out and putting yourself in a purposeful failure situation. And what I mean by this is that some of the guys I was talking about who tried to they had a lot of success in overcoming some of their approach anxieties. They would do things, whatever it would be that would embarrass them. They go to a mall wearing a dress. And
like a full-on flower pattern movement.
Flower, and we're talking about big,
big burly hairy dudes.
Right, and they're like, I don't give a shit. And people are gonna ask me, they're gonna think I'm freaking weird, and I think I'm.
And this isn't the Mid-South too.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
isn't just.
I think I'm cross-dressed. It's like
no, in the heart of the country.
But you know what? I'm gonna make it cool, because I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just go and talk to people and joke and turn it into something that's just funny.
Fun for them.
It's like, exactly. And that's what you do, is if you're making it. Here's where being a performer has taught me a lot. Now, I did a lot with karaoke. I think a lot of people who are into karaoke will kind of understand this. Anytime that you're doing a performance, what people don't realize that one of the things that really separates a good performer is the ability to put yourself in a mental state that other people can empathize with.
And they want to be in as well.
Right. And that's one of the things, by the way, that think about if you have chaotic emotions and somebody else has a very solid emotion. Like, for instance, whenever, say something traumatic has just happened. If one person is extremely calm and is telling everybody, hey, I've got a plan, it's going to be all right, I've got this handled, then they can, what they do is they provide this grounding where other people's emotions are about to explode and make them panicky and people do very stupid things and make bad decisions while they're panicky. Well, so there's this natural tendency of humans to try to find someone when they are not emotionally in a good place, find someone who they can then think about their emotions and feel the same emotions. They can empathize with them.
Which is why social media like Instagram is so popular. You can just aimlessly scroll through, yachts and palm houses and pretty pictures, and that gives you this feeling of like, I want that, and it gives you a
but
temporary.
Specifically, think about if you saw a really great stage performance of a musician, and one of the things you'll find is we always talk about their energy. Well, why? Mm-hmm. Why is that? And then we talk about crowd energy. Why is the crowd energy and the performer's energy linked together? Because of that same sort of thing. We basically, sometimes that's why we turn on the boob tube, and television when we're sad and things like that, because we can get into the mindset of the characters that we're watching.
And distract from your own.
Right. And so the thing is, everybody likes having someone who's in a good mood, who's enjoying themselves, and sharing that joy.
Who's not rattled, maybe,
Right.
by things who's not embarrassed, who's not,
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the things, and by the way, this is the thing that really, for when you talk about why approaches go badly, one of the things that happens is women a lot of times are a little more empathic. Now, the neuroscience behind this is literally that men's brains are slightly more towards the Asperger spectrum. We lose
which can be mistaken for a sociopathic spectrum.
Yeah, but it's not.
Which it's not. But the idea is it is less involved.
There's less of a focus on micro expressions. There's less of a calculation of social interaction that occurs. There's a few things that we lose this one capacity to gain another capacity in, three-dimensional rotation and things that lead to creation of tools.
And constantly being keyed into other people's emotions will not give you that element of remaining calm or frame controlling into the right way. So there's a reason why that labor is delineated between men and women in general.
So the thing is, when you're approaching, a lot of times women have a lot of empathy, and that is, there's a type of empathy where a lot of times guys don't understand the different kinds of empathy. It took me a while to really kind of
I don't think science, actually, I don't think psychology it has
and
elucidated it.
Well, one of the types of empathy
has.
that they talk about with mirror neurons, and I'm pretty sure that's specifically the one type of empathy, but there's another that I think most men immediately think of, and that is, I know what you're thinking. I know it. In other words, you know it in a sort of an academic sense. You know what they're feeling. It's like, I know that person is crying. I understand that. That's I get it. Yeah, I know, and I even know when they're hiding their sadness. I still know it. Knowing it is not the same as as another type of empathy, where you cannot help but feel what the other person is feeling. And women are more likely to have that sort of empathy, where they mirror your emotions. So therefore, when you feel awkward and you walk up to somebody, they can pick up your micro expressions,
uncertainty,
your body language, and little tiny things that men's brains aren't focused on picking up those things as much, and women's brains are just usually better at it. And so they pick up the awkwardness and then they feel it. And so that makes they become uncomfortable because you are uncomfortable. Now, remember what I was talking about with the one person who's got it handled, and or the performer on stage who they are out there, and they are really, you can tell that they are wrapped up in the emotion of the song that they're singing, and they're alive, and they're like a lightning rod, and then everybody else is jumping up and down with them because they can feel that lightning, and it courses through them as well. So the opposite of that is also true. And so that's why a lot of times we have problems with approach, is because when people are more empathic, you approach them, you're anxious, they feel the anxiety, they cannot help but feel the same unpleasantness that you are feeling, and they weren't necessarily feeling it before. So you're basically they feel like you've just imposed that upon them. Now, a lot of guys are gonna be like, well, you should just control your emotions, and it's easy enough to say, but this is where I like to try to point out to guys, okay, I want you to think of a time in your life where you cried in public, and because that is the worst horror a guy goes through, is where he cannot help but the tears to slip out in front of people, and it's fucking terrible. And so most of us guys can remember that. It's like this, oh, damn it, and so there's a if you can understand how there was, with all of your pushing, you were pushing with everything you had to keep that emotion from going over a border, going over something. Now, imagine if somebody turned up the intensity of all of your emotions such that they were all of the same intensity of that thing that made you cry in public. And imagine that being turned up. And that's the thing, a lot of people don't understand, that a lot of people are having different experiences of reality. The intensity of certain feelings can be radically different. The force with which they come through, they can come through as like a river pushing you down. It can be something, and whereas Yeah, exactly. An avalanche is just, it's destroying you, and over very small things. I mean, what you would think, and with your own experience, is like, oh, that I don't feel anything from that, or I feel a little tiny twinge, and of course I can control that, and so everybody else should too. That's not how reality works, though. That's not how people's brains work. They are different, and different people have what you think is a very easy to control thing because it is easy to you, is not easy for other people, and so they have to find other ways around those circumstances, and they've found other ways around them. And so there some of the things that we've been finding through neuroscience is how much the experience of reality can be modulated in all of these various ways for different people. And so anyway, so the point here is that so if you can get to the point where you're comfortable and understand, because I remember I was talking about the whole forgiveness thing. When you're walking up to people and you're anxious, and then they end up accidentally syncing with you, and then therefore it's unpleasant, and so they try to push you away. You have to understand that's just going to happen. So one of the ways is to start to get yourself used to interacting with people, and so long as you can get to the idea, it's like, well, it's okay because I am trading something, and I have something to trade, is that I can be entertaining, or I can be pleasant, or I can just smile. Because sometimes just giving people a smile, just practicing going out into public, looking people in the eyes and smiling at them in a genuinely pleasant way, that you and try to project your feelings. Because here's the thing, a lot of people read feelings better than you do, and women in general, they read real actual feelings better than you do. So it can't be something that you are just doing with your face. You're not going to do it where they'll feel it. There's something deeper. Our minds are more powerful than that. They pick up little tiny things that you can't really only some of the best actors out there are and a lot of times the reason why they are so good is because they induce the feeling. They don't change their face or anything like that. They
think about something that makes them feel that way,
and then they are actually feeling the emotion, and that's why you then see that emotion
and
from
feel it
them
too.
And feel it too. Exactly. It's because they're not acting. They're experiencing. They've trained themselves to experience something in the moment, to be the character.
Experience it on cue.
Act like the character. Yeah. So the same thing, if you can look at people and say, I would like for this person to have a good day. I would like for them to enjoy a smile and feel like other people like them, and that people are, and just basically by giving that from yourself, you will also get something in return. And there's nothing, it's like, I hate when people talk about like philanthropy. You just, the only reason they're a philanthropist is because they can feel good by himself. It's like, fuck you, okay? Yes, guess what? Anytime that you do good deeds, you get something out of it, and that is not only okay, that is the way it should be, and that's the way it has to be.
You should feel good for doing good things.
Right, and so
you do deserve reward for doing good things.
And so you need to understand that instead of doing that, a woman is the only reason she's feeding that baby is because she wants to maximize her genes. Fuck off with that stupid shit. Stop focusing on that dumb shit. Instead, focus on the things that are valuable, the things that will actually enhance your life. And seeing the world in a more beautiful fashion will tend to enhance the way that you experience life. It's just like living do you want to live in a cold, hard dump, or do you want to live in a beautiful forest? There is, the same thing is true of your mental environment and how you mentalize things. You can decide to see the worst of things, or you can decide to see the best of them, because they have two aspects. And so yeah, you know what? A philanthropist does get something out of it, and he's still doing something good. And so the same thing is true when you're going out there and you try to, if you are trying to genuinely enhance other people's lives, it is okay for you to then also appreciate that enhancement, and that everybody's coming up together. Everybody is increasing their enjoyment together, and you're playing a part of that, and that's something you can feel good about, and it's something that can start to get you past the general bad interaction stage, and that is you're giving away something free, which is just smiling at people, just looking at them in a pleasant way and feeling inside yourself, that you wish this person well, and they will sense it. That's the thing. Human minds are really powerful at picking up these tiny, tiny little things. And when you feel inside that you really have genuine good intent towards them, they'll pick up on it subconsciously, and it will enhance their life. What were we going to say?
I was picking up a hair off you, but yes, the defy feminist expectations of you.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Kill them with kindness.
Kill them with kindness. And do you want to say something else?
You go ahead.
Well, you segued perfectly into so we talked about approach, and one last thing that could help approach is, and you mentioned that too, is setting yourself up for failure purposefully in order to get rid of the fear or the unpleasantness of a bad interaction, and to get used to it, and to actually find that maybe the fear is greater than the experience itself. Like the fear is the thing to fear, not what is actually going to be the result. You may be pleasantly surprised by how your interactions go if you set yourself up for failure and don't expect things to go well, in the sense of just coming up to someone, being silly, being whatever, saying hello,
some
joking.
people are going to be shitty towards you, and you need to be set.
But you may be surprised by how well it will go other times.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, put yourself in a circumstance to forgive people, and actually have a genuine understanding. It's like, I have caused issues with people. I have been unpleasant towards people when they didn't deserve it. I have been not understanding another person's situation, because it's not possible for anybody to always understand everybody else's situation. It just isn't. And so therefore, with that in mind, you can go out there, set yourself up to end up having, some negative experiences, but just be out there ready to forgive people and understand. And that forgiveness, it isn't for them, it's for you. It's, forgiving people is about understanding the impossibilities of all of these complexities of working together, and just being able to have that buffer between each other. I mean, imagine if every time somebody bumped into somebody else, it was such a high offense that you had to kill each other over it. There are these buffers that we have to have, and the same thing is true.
And that we need to increase if we want to cooperate
Right.
and continue as a civilization.
Exactly, and people keep trying to go, oh no, we need more punishment, more reduction of buffers, more following of these exact perfect rules, because there's got to be some perfect rule to
Off
work
with their
out.
head.
And it doesn't work out. What you instead need is a looser ability for everybody to be more patient with each other, to be more tolerant with. Yeah, I hate to use that keyword, because so many people think poorly of it.
Problematic things are problematic, and tolerance is tolerant. Look, if you have such an issue with hug boxes, or echo chambers, or snowflakes, well, the opposite of being a snowflake is being tolerant. That's just how it is. Not being sensitive is being tolerant.
Yeah. So yeah, we're talking about one of the things that we talked about is like the whole, we like the ABC thing, approach, bravery, confidence, and it's like, well, isn't bravery and confidence the same thing? It's like, well not necessarily.
Yes, and exactly. Actually, going off of the approach, I just wanted to mention one last thing that will go from approach to bravery. That the bridge between those two is that repeated interaction, which is helped by the forgiveness that you're talking about. So having the right mindset of going into it with forgiveness, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. Everyone's just in a giant mosh pit. They, their dad could have just died. They could have, they could have just been dropped on the head too many times as a baby, and they're a permanent asshole now. Regardless, not your circus, not your monkeys. Who cares? Forgive them, move on. Force your mind to have a positive experience even when everything is terrible.
And then
repeatedly
give yourself a pat on the back for making the world a better place. Go right ahead.
For not adding to that mire. So we go from, with this repeated exposure to interactions, is one of the ways to deal with approach anxiety. Well, of course, the things we mentioned, how to formulate your thinking, will help with the initial approach. But then,
let me just address one thing, because I think it is important, because people really hate the idea of ever rewarding themselves for good behavior. But here's the thing, one of the things that they've found in neuroscience is that reward is how you reinforce behavior. So it is crucial whenever you want to teach an animal, they learn better through reward than they do through punishment. If you want to be a person that is doing good things, then you need to make sure you are rewarded for those good things in any way that you can. If you can in some way reward yourself for what you know to be good behavior, you should be doing it if you want to make sure that you are more likely to do that behavior in the future. This whole idea of not wanting any reward or anything like that, it may be some sort of like tradition culturally or something like that, but it's just a bad practice, because what we've found out scientifically is that if you want behaviors to be repeated, they need to be rewarded, and people will you can set up where a person doesn't even know that they're doing something more frequently because they didn't recognize that they were rewarded for that behavior, and they'll still do that behavior more frequently.
There's a great NLP story about that, right? With the clinking of the ring against the cup.
Yeah, there kind of is. It's somewhat similar, but there's plenty of stories around it. I encourage you to look these things up, question anything that we say, look it up, see if it's true. But the point is that there is an important thing of treating your subconscious mind, those systems that are kind of outside of your reach, all of those many millions of things that you consider kind of in the background before you come to that this or that sort of conscious decision. There's so many other things going on, and so you need to be kind of training yourself like you would train an animal. And so that's why it is important that you focus on rewarding good behaviors, and so that I can't harp on this enough, because there is such a huge, I don't know, kind of like a cultural thing that I know is out there about not accepting the reward for doing things that are good, and that's just so bad. That is such a destructive methodology. It's such a counterproductive idea.
Well, I think it has to do with what defines good, because some people will find that being a cutthroat capitalist is good, and others find that being in a commune is good, and neither of those will agree with each other.
Yeah, I suppose, but then at that point you kind of have to, rely on them. It's like there are certain things that are a little more obviously good when it comes to
like not kicking puppies.
Yes, when it comes to interacting with people and doing things like basically just enhancing the day of the people that you run into on a daily basis.
The golden fucking rule. How about that?
Yeah, some of that would be a good idea. So I mean, generally speaking, though, it still applies. When it comes down to it, whatever behaviors you want to enhance need to be rewarded. So do that. So pat yourself on the back when you've done something you should do, and don't shy away from that, because then you're not embracing you're just not embracing a scientific system. You're not embracing a system that works. You're using some sort of superstitious crap that was passed down to us by
some feeling shit.
By some fucking idiots. Sorry, whatever it is. I don't know. We've been told this over and over, and it's dumb. It doesn't work with what we've found with science.
So, seriously, research it. Look into if reward yields better results than punishment, and find out for yourself.
Yes, and even if it doesn't, even if it was equal, still reward is a way to increase the behavior.
Equal, which one would you rather have, punishment or reward? But yeah, I know, of course, with animal models and things like that, conditioning, behavioral conditioning is based on rewards. Pavlov's dog, all of that stuff is based on reward.
Okay, so I felt like that was necessary, because I know there's a general feel against that good behavior of making sure to reward good behavior. So yeah, but then we're going to go, so there's approach.
So yeah, we're talking about approach.
Bravery.
And how, so we dealt with approach anxiety, and then the more times you approach, the less that anxiety will be. It'll fade with newness, and fear will fade, and you will begin to find enjoyment in it, and before you know it, you don't have that anxiety anymore. Now, something you mentioned, which was, would you rather live in a cold, dark hovel, or in a beautiful forest, palace, beach, whatever? That leads to my next point, which is, how do we induce bravery? How do we get that feeling? And I would like to actually talk about manifesting. which is a hippy-dippy concept. However,
well, let's first talk about that bravery is not a lack of fear. Bravery is the decision to overcome fear,
yes,
and that it is still present. Then and a lot of times that's why there is a difference between bravery and confidence. Confidence precludes the need for bravery. Bravery is what you do when you
aren't confident.
When you aren't confident, and you decide to take the risks anyway.
Right. So actually, being brave is what gets you to overcome your approach anxiety in the first place, and sort of harnessing that I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm not gonna let anyone's opinion of me or anything hold me back from doing the things that I enjoy, from going out there, from not being essentially dead. Because if you're hiding from the world all the time because you're maybe rightfully so afraid of it, that's you're not living. You're not really experiencing life in all it has to offer. And of course, a lot of us are just stuck in one single place that we were born and raised in. Like, a lot of people don't even make it past their hometown. And you have to realize that there's a huge world out there with vastly different cultures and vastly different types of people. And
there's this general feeling we get that where we feel like the only experience that we could have is the experience that we've already had, and it's an absurd lie, because the thing is, there is this is one of the hardest things, is trying to get out of yourself. You have this idea of how reality is going to work, and it's basically you've got all these probabilities. This is what's likely here, this is what's likely there, and they're bullshit. They're skewed based on weird circumstances that are specific to you, and you have all these beliefs, and everybody does have all these beliefs about what's likely and what's unlikely that are just way off base and self-fulfilling. And that's one of the other things that I try to point out to people. Whenever you expect that a person, like, say you expect that a person is not going to like you, you're going to automatically be defensive
and hostile, possibly,
and you're going to interpret their words as meaning, like, what kind of shitty thing is this person saying to me right now? And so guess what? What if they would have totally liked you and had absolutely no problem with you, but then because of the fact that you expected shittiness from them and your defensiveness put you in a posture, then that specific posture has actually caused them to like you less, and so therefore your expectation became self-fulfilling prophecy. And we do this all the time. Everybody does it, where they have your anxiety or in your beliefs about, everybody's going to treat me like shit, end up making everyone treat you like shit because you are acting defensive. And defensiveness
or suspicious or hostile,
right?
And even in ways that you may not perceive, but it's because you're in your own head. You don't know what you look like from the outside. You don't exactly for sure know what you may be transmitting to others.
So that's one of the things also is that you can try to work on, is understanding your skewed perspective is bullshit. Really,
feminists believe that they're likely to be raped on every corner. Now, is that true? Of course not. But they have this expectation because of being in their own head.
And so sometimes just by changing your expectations, even if you think, well, that's just not true, though. It's just not true that the people will automatically like me. It's just not true. You got to start beating it into yourself that your beliefs aren't gospel.
They're based on incomplete data. A lot of other people, some people believe that there's a high chance of meeting an angel when they go outside. I mean, there's a lot of silly ideas, and I understand that you don't feel like your ideas are silly, but these people don't think their ideas are silly either.
And the whole reason they have them is because they've constantly built up these systems in their head of thinking of what's probable and what's not, and they can get,
and probability is based on data sets, and if you have not experienced,
and you have a limited data set,
yes.
That's the point, is you have a limited data set, and it can become extremely skewed, because the one thing about random numbers is that they stack, and if you learn anything about random stuff, it's not an average. It's
And a lot of times it's not even, you haven't even done enough experiments to get an accurate average. You've gone out twice had a bad experience, they're like, that's it, never again.
And that's, yeah,
You know?
exactly. And that's the thing. We always think we have this huge data set. Every kid thinks that they've got it all figured out, or, you know, and then, oh, well, now that I'm 18, now I've got so much experience. I know how everything works. And then the same thing when you're, you know, 40. You know, so you keep thinking that your current data set is big enough, and then when you get to a much larger data set, you go, oh, that data set was fucking terribly tiny. It was worthless. Oh my God, that was such a skewed, worthless set of data that I thought was so huge when it was so tiny and so skewed because it was tiny. It's like, oh man, I flipped heads 3 times in a row. That's all I need to know, that coins will always come up heads. You know, it's like, no. Your data set is shit. And so beginning to understand that we get these skewed perspectives and being able to doubt your automatic coming to the feeling that, oh, my life's going to go this way, people are going to treat me that way, things are going to go this way. Being able to doubt that is kind of an important part of breaking down those things that keep you from changing, that keep you from basically deciding to be who you want to be. And that's where that whole fake it till you make it thing kind of comes in, is that it may feel fake, but it's not. There's self-fulfilling prophecies that work. That's where that whole, you know, people love the secret and stuff like that, and they kind of explain it in a magical way.
Law of attraction. Oh, I'll get to that. Oh, I got science, man.
But the truth of the matter is, what's happening is self-fulfilling prophecies. And when people are optimistic, they are ready. Their pattern recognition is just really...
They're receptive.
Working overtime to find any possibility of things going right. And they'll chase down that thing, that possibility of going right, and they won't pay as much attention to the failures, and the reverse is true. And they'll end up taking advantage of more opportunities and finding more opportunities. And then the reverse is true. When you're looking for things to go badly and you expect that every chance that you take is going to go wrong, then you'll focus on every one that did go wrong, and you'll say, yep, there's more proof, more confirmation bias. Things are going to go wrong. They're always going to go wrong. I've proven it over and over, blah, blah, blah. Here I can now I can pity myself and, you know, collapse into a pile of shit. You know, and so we all have that system. I'm not, you know, here I'm speaking very generally, and I don't know you, but guess what? It's because all of us do this dumb shit.
Yes, and you know, this is perfectly exactly what I'd like to talk about, which is manifesting. We are talking about habits and expectations, and they are under your control. You can rewrite your brain and what it sees and believes and expects, and with that you will change your life, quite literally. Neuroplasticity, which is the constant wiring and rewiring of neurons, helps us train our brain. So you can quite literally train your mind to see things or to believe in things simply by thinking about them and believing in them, and just over and over and over doing it. And so what manifesting is, it is, once again, we're talking about law of attraction, we're talking about the secret, and the manifesting is you imagine, you know, I don't know what you want, a cup of coffee or a limousine or a beach vacation or a partner for life. You imagine something that you want and focus on it and stay focused on it with your mind. Don't think about things you don't want. Think about positive things that you do want, good things, and just constantly think about the way you want your life to go, the way you want yourself to be, the things you want in your life. And the idea is, The Secret, which is a book and a movie, the idea is that these things that you want, by constantly manifesting them in your mind's eye, in your imagination, in your thinking about it, it will actually come to you.
And what happens is you just invest more, you recognize more opportunities and possibilities as possibilities to get there, and you invest more. You put more time into it instead of being a wuss bag and giving up easy. And that's what happens is you put more time into it, you stop paying attention to your losses of time, failed attempts, things like that, and you instead go straight at your target and go right for it. And see, here's the thing: when it comes down to excessive fear or excessive desire, and that's what we generally have when you look at like extremist conservatives and extremist liberals, is you have excessive desire and excessive fear. But the truth of the matter is, you know, if you have to pick fear or desire is the better of the two in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that is that when when you think about a cat that's chasing a mouse, but the cat is being chased by a dog. Now, the thing is, you're going to try your very best to go after something that you really, really want. And you can be focused on what you're going after, or you can be focused on the fear of what's coming after you. And the truth of the matter is, all of us, the bridge is falling apart behind us, like, there's always something behind us. There's always wolves at the door. There's always that, and you can become.
There's always death chasing you.
and whenever you're thinking about that, it feels tiresome. It feels like you want to give up. You just want to break. But what happens when you're going after the things that you love? When you're going after the things that you desire. You feel full of energy. You stay up you stay up all night. You go after them.
You jump out of bed in the morning.
And the truth of the matter is, that you are that cat in the middle. And the difference is just whether you're focused on going after the mouse or if you're focused on the dog that's after you. It doesn't, you can choose to your experience. And guess what? You're going to have more when you're focused on the joy of going after what you want. You're going to have more energy, and that's where that whole the secret thing comes from. By focusing on the positivity, you put in that extra effort where if you just pushed a little further, pushed a little harder, done a little more work because you had faith, you got over that hump. But when you feel like it's not going to work out, it's not going to happen, then what happens is you don't put in the extra work. You don't put in the extra effort because you feel like it's an exercise in futility and your time would be spent better elsewhere. And what ends up happening is you end up so scattershot that you're not spending enough time in any one thing.
And you defeat yourself.
So that's how the secret really does have a way of becoming self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, it's a two-edged sword. Self-fulfilling prophecy happens whether you're prophesying negative or you're prophesying positive. And it's through the recognition and effort that you end up putting into it. So it's a real thing. Just because we tend to capture things in a magical thinking sort of way doesn't mean we haven't captured something useful. Just like when ancient people decided that God hates you and will make you be eaten of worms if you dare eat pork. And so they thought of it in a magical way, but the truth of the matter is they were avoiding trichinosis. You do get worms in your muscles and it's likely to happen by eating pork. So we human beings have been capturing things like this with magical ideas, but just because it's a magical idea doesn't mean it's actually false or that there isn't a mechanism that makes it work. There are mechanisms that can make certain things work, like the secret. And the truth of the matter is you don't have to think about the mechanism that much. You can just use it as a tool. You can use the secret as I want to focus on the things that I want, and by doing that you will in a certain way kind of call them to you, because there's these automated systems that you're kind of by generally reaching to it, you adapt into the individual circumstance, and you
our brains are very powerful. The subconscious will do what you tell it to do. So if you're telling it to look for ways in which things suck, it'll do it.
It'll do a great job of it.
But if you tell it to look for things that you want, it'll do that. And that will change your expectations and therefore open you up to more experiences, because you will have different expectations. And yes, going after things you love is beneficial, not just because you're going to get them, but because you get to have that experience. And this is something that Herc said in Twitch chat with some bits here. Going after the things you love is so beneficial. Thumb up, angel face, and a heart. and yeah, and not only because you are more you will get what you look for. You will find it. And so if you look for positive things, you will find them. But also, even if you don't, let's say all of it's bullshit, none of it works, we're just full of shit. Well, what would you rather have? A life in which you're constantly thinking about how everything sucks, or a life in which you're seeing everything with rosy glasses? I mean,
yeah. See, the point is it's going after something joyful. Even if a cat doesn't catch,
right,
it doesn't catch the mouse, it might have been led towards a bird. And
it got to work out.
And that's the thing, yeah. And it had a joyful experience. It was playful and fun. And that's the thing, is they enjoyed what they were doing. And that's what your life is about. It's not about getting to some specific ends. It is about having joy throughout the entire process.
And that's what happiness is. The
right.
happiness
you may
is the
think
way.
of specific ends are the way to get you to find your joy, but the truth of the matter is the whole thing needs to be joyful. And so once again, it's about managing your mindset, and this is one of the ways to manage your mindset is through that focus. And so yeah, you know, one of the other things that kind of messes things up is when you are so focused on a particular ends instead of going towards a general target and accepting hitting a nearby target. You instead are like, you know, what if you shoot for the stars and then hit the moon? Are you going to be upset about hitting the moon? And a lot of people are. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to be satisfied because, oh, I was shooting for the stars. I didn't get the stars. Oh, who cares? I got the moon. Fuck the moon. You know, it's like, dude, fuck. You know, no. Appreciate life. You got to appreciate that you ended up getting there. And so, and even if it's, that's the whole
appreciate
thing
any positive because it's sure as fuck not a negative,
right?
And it's not even a net zero. It's a positive.
It's still
good.
a positive, and
Yeah.
so we can get lost in this focusing so much on a particular goal when instead, if you can have more vagueness to your goals, is like, oh, I'd like a lot of these different things, and I'm just gonna really like any of them that happen. I'm gonna focus on trying to make, you know, all of them happen with, you know, some of these being other ones that I like the most. I'm gonna try really hard to make those happen, and I'm gonna focus on them. And but then just being able to be cool with all of the nearby accomplishments that will happen as well. And that's kind of the whole joy in the process. The you know, the cat, like I said, well, it may not catch the mouse, but hey, it might be led to another mouse, or it might, you know, one way or another, there's a positivity to that going after, and truthfully, it usually leads in generally in a direction that you want to go anyway. Because when you're putting effort into things and you're really active in your life, positive things do end up coming of it.
Yes, and we're talking about all of these things are building habits. You know, doing it once will not really yield the results that you're looking for. All of this, everything we've talked about is
habit.
Is predicated on the idea of you have to make this your habit. This is the daily practice that you have to do. And there's
the
more.
Approach thing. You have to practice interacting with people regularly. You've got to put yourself in situations that will, you know, make it where you can get numb to your fears and build up your positive experiences, so you'll remember more positive experiences instead of remembering a bunch of negative experiences. And so that's the habit that changes your memory of the way that things work, so that you'll have a different outlook on what is likely, and your perspective on the world will then become a feedback loop. You'll expect better of the world, and so you'll see better of the world, and more and better things will happen in the world. And so that's kind of the point, is to create these habits that create feedback loops where things continue to get better and better, because we're constantly creating negative feedback loops. That happens all the time. So what you're wanting to do is construct positive feedback loops.
And yes, and if you're not daily maintaining something, it will degrade. That's just, I guess, entropy. I don't know. There, you know, there is an element of putting in daily upkeep that will help you maintain your state longer. And a lot of things that we're going to continue talking about, they are once again based on daily experiences.
And don't see it as one of the things that that is also an important tool is not to think of it as a grind. Oh, I've got to keep up with these habits. I've got to do these things. Instead, see them as, well, think about like when you're getting in the car to go on vacation, and you're driving out to the beach or whatever. That drive to the beach like when you're doing it, you're full of joy because you're doing it. And that's the thing that you need to see, is whenever you are taking these actions that are habitual, and that you need to see it as that you're doing it. You're accomplishing your goal in the act. It's not some tedium. It is the act of doing it. The thing at the end and the thing at the beginning are one thing. And you need to
the
be
way
able
to
see
your
it.
goal is part of the goal.
Are the steps.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times people who can see the steps to a goal as as part and parcel in the same thing as the accomplishment of the goal,
and feel as positive about it,
are the ones that accomplish more, and the ones who end up getting that reward of accomplishment, and they get it all throughout it, because they're seeing it as like, I'm doing it, I'm getting in the car and I'm driving to the beach, this is great, I'm so happy. And like, you know, and so the people who are actually in the car, they don't have to arrive
at the beach to start experiencing the happiness. They know they are in the process of doing it. You're in
Well
the
said.
process of accomplishing your goal.
Yeah, and one thing that I would recommend as a way to deal with approach anxiety, but also mitigate your potential fallout from dealing with untrustworthy people and people who mean you harm because of your gender or color or whatever, is to volunteer at a soup kitchen, actually. Or somewhere else, anywhere, volunteer, because that will give you access to interacting with people, and that'll help you deal with any of those things that may hold you back, any kind of fearful experiences, because you will just get accustomed to meeting people. And a lot of times volunteer organizations, they don't want your money as much as they want your time. They need hands, they need people who can do the thing, who can do the outreach, and
do something philanthropic.
Yes.
that can allow you to give yourself a pat on the back, because that's going to make you feel
and engage with
like
the community.
like a valuable person, and it's going to be the truth. That's the thing, is you want to produce proof that you're a valuable person. Produce it for you. Nobody else has to recognize it. Nobody else has to even know about it. Just do it for you. Produce proof that you are valuable, so that no matter what is occurring around you with other people or things like that, you still know who you are and what you are. And that's one of the ways that you can really kind of get around caring about other people's consensus ideas, because consensus a lot of times is mob rule for truth. It's crap that we've for thousands of years we've thought that crazy bullshit. We've thought crazy bullshit, and that's what what millions of people thought. It was the consensus, a bunch of stupid, crazy bullshit. And so there's got to be a way for you to kind of get around that, and that is being able to value yourself. Do those things that will help you value yourself, and make sure to give yourself the pat on the back. Be sure that you tell yourself that you are valuable,
recognize
and
yourself.
recognize the accomplishments, and be really appreciative of your accomplishments and recognize them. And so that way you will do those things that are productive, those things which are valuable, those things which make a person valuable, because that's what you want. You want to be more valuable. So do those things. And then you don't care if other people, and truthfully, sometimes it's kind of nice to hide it. It's kind of nice to hide, that way you have this kind of, yeah, sure, misjudge me. You're just wrong. And you're never going to know all the things that I've done to try to make this world a better place. You will not know the sacrifices I've made to make myself more valuable. But I know.
That's all that
matters. And you know what? I'm not even going to let you know. And sometimes there's kind of a power to that. There's kind of a power to knowing, to having this secret knowledge of the things that you have done to, exactly, the things that you have done to try to make the world a better place. That makes that you can know that you are a good and valuable person. That regardless of anybody else's opinion of you, you know who you are.
And a word on people's opinions is that a lot of times they carry both a positive and a negative opinion about you. They have all simultaneously. No, they're
completely opposites.
Yes,
in their head at the same time. It's fucking crazy.
Well, no, it's just they don't know what to do with this new thing, so they're prepared with every possible idea.
But it's funny that for the longest time I always thought of human beings as having these unitary opinions, and they don't. They always have opposite opinions that are completely in opposition to each other.
And they're waiting for you to prove to them which one to believe.
Yeah, and it's not just about you, it's about lots of things.
Yes.
And you'll find if you search around in your head that you have opposing opinions simultaneously, and given whatever circumstance brings it up, you'll end up, some people are more unitary in their opinions than others, of course.
Yes, of course.
But but
we're not immune to it.
Yeah, we're not immune to it. And there's a lot of people who they don't have a single unitary opinion. They have opposite opinions about absolutely every goddamn thing, and they're literally complete opposites. It seems impossible that a person could believe utterly opposite things about the same thing, but they do based on the circumstances. And that's a level, that's a type of adaptation. They are adaptive, but it's got huge weaknesses when you're talking about a problem-solving sort of activity. Like if I were to write a program or something, it has huge weaknesses, but it is a way of being adaptive, and that's why their brains have that two completely opposing opinions about things so that they can be more adaptive to circumstances. I tend to dislike minds that are like that. They are not my favorite kind of people, I can tell you that. But
But you can understand it.
But I understand it, exactly. I understand that's a commonality that we all have, at least some of. That
Right.
two completely opposing opinions.
I mean, if you don't chase it down, you may have it.
And
but
then whatever you believe that they'll believe about you ends up being what they believe about you. It's so weird to see this. There's this interaction between people where where you end up altering which opinion they hold about you based on which opinion you believe that they'll hold about you. Because of those subtleties, it's that whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing.
And that's how confidence works.
Yep. I need to run to the bathroom.
A lot of times, that idea that we mentioned for a second, fake it until you make it, it actually has strong basis in reality, because as we mentioned, people do believe about you what you believe about you. I mean, why do you have, if you listen to Patrice O'Neal in his comedy specials, he talks about being a fat, ugly motherfucker, and yet somehow all these women want to sleep with him. How? Why? Well, it's because he carries himself and he presents himself like he's valuable, like he's king shit, like he is awesome, like they would be lucky to have him, and they believe it. And the same goes true for let's imagine a meek, awkward, shy, little nerd that comes into a classroom, and everyone instantly thinks that they're not valuable, that nobody wants them, that they don't have a girlfriend. Why do they think that? Because that's what that person presented themselves as. We pay attention to appearance and body language cues, and a lot of the body language that a person exhibits has to do with how they believe, what they believe about themselves, how they hold themselves, how they speak, the volume at which you speak to people, how straight your shoulders are, how high your head is. I mean, they used to talk about how royalty would look at people down their nose. What does that mean? That means their head is up high, they got their chest out, their back straight, their head up in the air, because they think they're great, they're the best. And what does everyone else around them do? They see that and they go, oh, this primate has been given a lot of reward and approval from the rest of the group, which is why they have the audacity to carry themselves that way. And you can life hack that. Just by behaving in a way that people would expect of a confident person, you will gain confidence, because people will start treating you like a confident person.
Yeah, instincts have a lot of really neat heuristics in them where they can glean information from the environment in a very kind of automated fashion. But one thing I wanted to say about the idea of fake it till you make it, it's I prefer it be more something like be it until you are it, because we tend to feel like it's fake, but that's not that's not the way to do it. That's not really, you don't fake it. You basically create a habit and do things that aren't necessarily who you usually think of yourself as. And that's the thing, who are you really? And who you are is not what you currently are. It's what you could be. It's what you strive to be. So your truest self is more what you're striving to be, and not your temporary state, because it is a temporary state. So we have these false ideas of who we are, like it's something set in stone, or something that when you have this strong idea of that I am this thing, instead of seeing yourself as what you could become and seeing yourself as that future self, you instead solidify some unchanging pile of crap that you don't like, instead of striving towards an ideal that you are attempting to accomplish. So that's what it's be it till you are it, is the whole fake it till you make it, because it's not that there is no, being ingenuine about things is not going to really be helpful.
Like one of the things I try to, some of the things that people can kind of misunderstand whenever they're looking at this from a strategic point of view is that it's like, oh, well, you just try to manipulate everyone around you, and by acting in the way that you think will work out the best and get you what you want, and it's like, well, no, whenever you manipulate others, here, let me get the cat. You're such an asshole, kitty. Whenever you manipulate others, you manipulate yourself. You are manipulated. Whenever you are attempting to, unlock somebody's lock, well, you're forming yourself into a key that fits them. So basically, you're
changing yourself.
You're implicitly causing them to manipulate you. And so there's this whole problem with being manipulative that people don't really recognize that it's just a form of conformity. It's
very specific.
Right, just because you feel well, I know I don't like it on the inside. Well, who gives a shit if you don't like it on the inside? Why are you doing it? And so it's like the whole you're still conforming. You're still conforming to things, to try to get what you want. And so having that sort of sinister, manipulative idea about things, people that tends to grant people some feeling of power, but it's kind of a false power. Well, it's not just kind of, it really is completely false. But so I guess my point is it's important to understand that there is a way of understanding that what you are trying to do is not do something ingenuine, but instead create habits by living in a way that is what you want to be. And by living in that way, you create the habits that are part of that person that you are in the process of becoming.
And what you want to be can change. It could change in a day, it could change in a year, doesn't matter. It's still what you want to be. That I believe that is where our true selves are. It is in what we find valuable and what we strive to be like, or what we wish to be like. And by creating habits of behaving in ways that we wish to be, you will become it. And speaking of values, and back to the conversation about reward that we were talking about earlier, I have some awesome stuff here about positive affirmations and value affirmations. That's yet another thing that sounds like just some pop psych silliness, but it's got a lot of awesome research behind it. And there's a...
So just to kind of recap for a second, basically what we're talking about is what is the nature of confidence? Where does confidence come from? And confidence comes from habits. It comes from a habitual... And not just that, but also from proof, from
experience,
from creating proof of things, and that goes back to that whole creating proof of your value, creating things that are proof to you, and not doing it for anybody else, but specifically for you. And that's what creates real confidence. Is just those experiences, basically.
And so there's this speaking of confidence and all of that, there's a self-affirmation theory that posits that people are motivated to maintain a positive self-view, and that threats to perceived self-competence are met with resistance. So when threatened, self-affirmation can restore self-competence by allowing individuals to reflect on sources of self-worth, such as core values. So the idea here is that you'll go out there, you'll go out in the field, you'll meet people, and some of them will react weirdly and badly, and you will be threatened. And how do you deal with that? What can you do to help you overcome some of these things? And it was found that value affirmations, so in other words, focusing on what your values are, getting in touch with your core self, the self that you want to be, the values that you hold about life.
I think in some cases they may be talking about where people will, when they're threatened, and they kind of back up to whatever their cultural or religious or whatever kind of belief that makes them feel safe. But instead of, I think everybody has that sort of, when you're threatened, you back up to whatever it is that you feel is most true or whatever. But instead of doing that, if you can instead look at
real things that you've created, that are the real things that are part of your I don't know exactly what to call it, but your idiom. No, is you to make it part of your story, I suppose. And so that what you're backing up to is looking at the progress of your life and the things that you've done, and then the things that which you're talking about, which is your value, your actual real value, instead of that.
No, I'm talking about values, like things that you believe to be good or true, or things that you find valuable about living, about humans, about the world, about how to behave. We're talking about essentially realigning with, because so often I believe that too many people spend time reacting to things without taking a moment to look inside them and realign and reevaluate what is happening and how they should react to it based on what they believe in their heart to be true and good and something to aspire to. So values, that's what we're talking about here. I believe that it's a whole study that's going to be linked in the resources on the Patreon page. But yes, the things like religion and I don't know, conservative values, liberal values, family values. Yes, all of these things is sort of your definition of yourself. These are core building blocks of what you find to be you. And which is why we talk about, being it until you are it. Those ideas of what is good in the world and what is good to have in a human, that is essentially what you are, what you truly believe is. And okay, so let's say you don't do things that you believe are good. That doesn't mean that you don't have the potential, because you do believe that they're good. You do believe that that is the ultimate way to be. So just because you're not doing it currently doesn't mean that still isn't really your truer self. That if you just...
and there's always value in attempt. Just because it's like nothing, he who shoots at nothing generally hits it. And so long as if you're not making attempts, then that's a problem. But when you are making attempts, those are valuable. Those are parts of the steps to get there. And so a lot of times people, just because they do not reach their goal, or don't reach their goal in the time that they want, will tend to devalue the attempts as, well, I'm not doing it, so it doesn't matter. It's but that's not true. You have to understand the value in the attempt, and that it is the step forward. Each failed attempt is just a step towards the goal, because it creates you're building skill, you're building a habit, you're building up towards something. Every failure is an increase it is a movement towards the goal.
Mm-hmm. And self-affirmation in particular, it can be a variety of things that define who you are, define what you believe is good, and take a moment to reflect on that and to change that. You're not beholden to anyone to maintain one specific idea for the rest of your life. Just like the ideas you had when you were 5 years old, of course you outgrew those, so it's okay to keep outgrowing ideas. So there's a lot of information to how to maintain confidence in face of rejection or conflict, or anything that is trying, or nervousness, or any kind of anxiety, anything that you may fear that you will do badly in, or anything like that, like a test, or or an interaction, or what have you. If you have fear, a performance anxiety, you can reflect on value affirmations, or self-affirmations, they're known. And there's a lot of research.
Sometimes there's also, I think, keeping your eyes on the prize. So sometimes you can back up to your values of what you're doing and where you're going, and then once again looking forward to the steps that you're taking, even in the moment that you're in it. If things are not going poorly, or they're arduous, or whatever, you keep your eyes on the prize, and and instead of seeing the momentary difficulty, you instead see that as part of the process of reaching the goal, just like being in the car on the way to the beach.
Yes, and spending time being introspective is actually really, really important for confidence, because self affirmations are quite powerful. Knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you find valuable, it can improve your confidence in life in a variety of ways, such as affirmations were found to boost grades in lasting ways, reduce sympathetic nervous system reaction to stressors, help lose weight and overweight people, improve intergroup and interpersonal relationships. One particular study, led by doctoral candidate Christopher Cassio and Associate Professor Emily Falk, Falk, and published in the journal Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience, used fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, to find that self-affirmation activates well-known reward centers in the brain. So the ventral striatum and ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and of course the prefrontal cortex also has to do with decision making and executive function, and it's sort of the part that separates us from primates, the thing that allows us to plan and to carry out those plans. So ventromedial prefrontal cortex and ventral striatum were activated, and these are the same reward centers that respond to pleasurable experiences, such as winning a prize or something. And self-affirmations were also found to strengthen nerve connections, rewiring your brain essentially in the way that you want it. So once again, it's a habit. It is a process of repeating, of having a feedback loop, of going in a loop over and over and over something, and that is how our brain works. It'll strengthen connections that you keep repeating. So the same is true for negative affirmations. So you can have positive affirmations, which in general is saying things out loud that are positive only, and your brain will be like, oh, okay, we're on the positive train now. And that is also true for negative things. The more you think and repeat and go over and over negative things, the more those pathways will be strengthened. So you have complete, essentially, control over what your brain will tend to do if you put in enough training.
The master of your mind.
Mm-hmm. And also another really, really cool thing about self-affirmations is that they were found to enhance performance by having people be receptive to mistakes. So that's where the confidence comes in. By having value affirmations or self-affirmations, you can kind of get out of the moment that you're in and think of your larger self. Think of all the accomplishments that you've done. Think of the things that make you good and a valuable person. And that will help you not take it too hard so much when you make a mistake, or be so down on yourself, or in general. A lot of times when people will avoid
how much mistakes are an absolute necessity for everything, is I think.
But if you've had a lot of negative experiences and lack in self-confidence, every new mistake you make is just further proof that you're worthless.
Yeah,
and so
you
there's
feel like it's proof, and it's
feel
not.
like it. No, of course not. But in your mindset, and that's what it ends up, because you believe that, it ends up making you even less receptive to mistakes. But the only way to improve and to actually get better is to clearly and openly look at the things that happened. And if they didn't go the right way, you can change that. It is, everybody makes mistakes. Everything is constantly a mistake. It is impossible to not make mistakes. And a mistake is such a painful word to some of us that,
the funny thing is, I think that one of the, I'm just going to talk about something that it's actually kind of important to me, and that is I think that the development of strong AI will begin to really advance when they understand that creativity is a type of mistake. And that is whenever you are so I don't know how many people have seen the deep dreaming things, with like the Google AI and all of that, where basically what happens is they it starts doing this pattern recognition where you see these eyes of birds and things like that keep like showing up over and over in this weird pattern. Well, what's happening is that it's pattern recognizing something, and you can cause, once a neural network's been trained, you can cause it to create a whole new picture that has never existed before. In other words, like if it's been trained on birds, that pattern recognition that you've seen, where you've seen the shitty version of it, where it's just going through all these recognitions that show pieces of animals and things like that. Well, those pieces of animals, if there is, that's the recognition and additive phase. If there's then another phase where it goes back and forth, where it prunes it and then adds back to it, and then prunes it and then adds back to it, what you end up having is the creation of a brand new picture. And so you can cause creativity in a machine, but the essence of that creativity is faulty pattern